Before you scroll away, pause for a second, because if you've ever felt like you give more than you receive, like you sense things others don't, like your heart has been tested again and again, this message may be for you. Empaths are not rising by accident, and 2026 is not just another year on the calendar. Something is shifting quietly, spiritually, and deeply. For a long time, you were misunderstood, drained, even broken by people who couldn't value your depth. But what if those seasons were not meant to destroy you, only to prepare you? What if God allowed the pain because He trusted you with what comes next? The strongest version of the empath isn't loud, angry, or seeking revenge. It's calm, grounded, and unshakable. And when that version awakens, everything changes. Stay with me until the end, because what I'm about to share might explain why your life felt delayed, why your heart was tested so heavily, and why your rise will surprise everyone, including the ones who doubted you. And if this already feels familiar, don't just watch quietly. Leave a comment and claim it, and subscribe so you don't miss what's unfolding next. God allowed the breaking before the becoming, and this is something many empaths struggle to understand while they are living through it. When you were betrayed, overlooked, or repeatedly disappointed, it did not mean you were cursed or forgotten. It meant you were being shaped in ways comfort could never achieve. Empaths feel deeply, trust easily, and love sincerely, which often places them in situations where their kindness is tested by those who lack depth or integrity. Each painful experience stripped away illusion. Each loss sharpened your ability to sense truth beneath words. Over time, you began to notice patterns: who was genuine, who was draining, and who only stayed while you were useful. That awareness did not come from theory, it came from lived experience. God did not punish you for having a soft heart. He strengthened it by teaching you discernment. The disappointment you endured trained you to pause instead of rushing to rescue. The betrayals taught you that not everyone deserves access to your inner world. The seasons of loneliness forced you to develop a relationship with yourself and with God, rather than depending on external validation. What once felt like constant breaking was actually a process of refinement. Just as pressure forms diamonds, pressure shaped your spiritual resilience. You learned to stand without applause, to remain kind without being naive, and to stay compassionate without abandoning your own needs. The breaking removed the need to please, the need to fix, and the need to prove your worth through sacrifice. In its place, wisdom quietly took root. Strength replaced overgiving. Clarity replaced confusion. Empaths are not meant to stay wounded. They are meant to become aware. God allowed the breaking because He knew what you were capable of becoming on the other side of it. The pain matured you. The silence strengthened you. The delay protected you. Now, what emerges is not the version of you that begs to be understood, but the version that understands. Not the version that pours endlessly, but the one that gives with intention. The becoming is not dramatic. It is steady, grounded, and deeply powerful. And when you look back, you will realize that nothing was wasted. Not a single tear, not a single loss, not a single moment you thought would break you forever. Sensitivity was never weakness, even though the world often treated it that way. For years, people told you to toughen up, to stop feeling so much, to ignore what you sensed, as if your emotions were a flaw instead of a gift. But what they didn't understand is that God was quietly transforming your depth into a strength unlike any other. Every tear you shed, every moment you felt deeply, every time your heart responded to another's pain, He was teaching you perception that goes far beyond surface appearances. You began to notice the unspoken truths, the hidden motives, and the subtle energies that most people overlook. That heightened awareness, once seen as oversensitivity, became your compass in life, guiding you away from harm and toward people and situations aligned with your purpose. God was shaping your intuition into wisdom, your empathy into insight, and your heart into a tool that could discern what others could not. While others were blinded by their assumptions and distractions, you were learning to see clearly, to feel deeply, and to understand the currents beneath the surface of every interaction. What was once considered too much is now your power. Your emotions became a lens for truth, a map for navigating challenges, and a light that illuminates paths invisible to most. Sensitivity is not weakness, it is divine design, a sacred skill that allows you to sense the unseen, speak with authenticity, and lead with a heart that is both wise and compassionate. The world may still misunderstand it, but God is showing you that your emotional depth is exactly what makes you formidable, grounded, and uniquely prepared for the rise ahead. 2026 marks a spiritual shift, a turning point that goes far beyond personal growth or self-improvement. This is divine timing, a season where God moves with precision, lifting empaths into a space where their gifts are aligned with purpose, clarity, and power. For years, many empaths have poured themselves into others, giving endlessly, sacrificing their energy, and sometimes losing themselves in the process. That was necessary, but now the time has come for a new chapter. God elevates empaths not to make them more vulnerable, but to channel their compassion through strength, wisdom, and discernment. Your heart will no longer be a soft target for those who do not appreciate it. Instead, it becomes a vessel of influence, a source of guidance, and a shield for the soul. In this shift, empathy is no longer a passive trait. It transforms into action with intention, insight with authority, and love with boundaries. What once was exhausting and one-sided now becomes balanced and potent. The spiritual currents of 2026 are guiding empaths to rise with clarity, to step into roles they were prepared for in silence, and to wield their gifts in ways that inspire, protect, and create transformation around them. This is more than growth. It is awakening to the truth that compassion, when paired with strength, becomes unstoppable. Empaths learned boundaries the hard way, and this lesson did not come easily. For years, their hearts were open, overflowing with care, love, and compassion, often to the point of self-sacrifice. They gave their energy freely, they offered understanding even when it wasn't returned, and they held space for others, even those who refused to hold space for themselves. Every time they reached out, every time they offered comfort to someone who was unready to heal, it chipped away at their own sense of self. And yet, this giving was not a weakness. It was part of the divine preparation. God chose empaths because he knew that their capacity to love deeply would one day become a shield rather than a vulnerability. The hard lessons came through repeated experiences, relationships that took more than they gave, friendships that left them drained, work situations where their efforts were unnoticed or exploited, and even family dynamics that demanded everything without offering reciprocity. Each situation felt like a test, a moment where the empath's natural inclination to help and nurture collided with the harsh reality that not everyone is willing or able to heal. For a long time, empaths walked through life carrying the weight of other people's unresolved pain, assuming that their role was to fix, save, or carry the burdens of those around them. They believed that compassion required sacrifice, and that being sensitive meant enduring more than their fair share of heartache. But gradually, over time, a quiet transformation took place. The repeated heartbreaks, the betrayals, and the one-sided relationships were not punishments, they were lessons. God was teaching empaths the importance of boundaries, showing them that their energy is precious and that their hearts deserve protection. Strength does not come from avoiding pain entirely, but from learning how to navigate it without losing yourself. Each experience taught the empath where to draw the line, when to say no, and how to give without giving up their soul in the process. Learning boundaries the hard way is not comfortable. It is messy, emotional, and sometimes lonely. Empaths who once tolerated disrespect who once tolerated neglect, who once tolerated emotional manipulation, begin to recognize patterns and break cycles. They begin to understand that saying no is not selfish, it is self-preservation. They discover that they cannot heal everyone, nor can they force growth in someone else's life. God chose empaths because their compassion is meant to be guided by wisdom, not drained by endless giving to those unwilling to receive. Strength now protects the heart, ensuring that their gifts, empathy, intuition, love, and understanding are used intentionally, not wasted on energy vampires or toxic dynamics. The moment an empath establishes boundaries is transformative. It may feel uncomfortable at first because it challenges old habits and the expectations of those around them. Some people may resist, complain, or even withdraw, but this is exactly what signals growth. When the world tests the boundaries of an empath, it is a reflection of their own evolution. God is teaching them that their heart is sacred, that their emotional energy is valuable, and that true compassion cannot exist without discernment. Empaths who learn this lesson gain a sense of empowerment that is quietly profound. They realize they can still love deeply, still give generously, and still nurture others, but with wisdom, protection, and alignment with their own well-being. In this process, the empath's relationships change. People who were once taken for granted begin to respect the limits the empath sets. Those who were selfish, manipulative, or toxic naturally drift away. And the space left behind is not empty. It is a sacred space for growth, healing, and connection with people who match the empath's energy. God's timing is evident here, as the shift allows empaths to surround themselves with reciprocity, authenticity, and mutual respect. Strength protects the heart, not to shut it off from the world, but to open it in the right way to the right people. Empaths are no longer bleeding for those unwilling to heal. They are standing grounded, offering love intentionally, and choosing where their energy flows. Empaths also learn that boundaries are not rigid walls. They are flexible, guided by discernment and inner wisdom. The hard lessons teach them that they can adjust boundaries based on circumstances without compromising their integrity or heart. They learn to trust themselves, to read energy accurately, and to act decisively when situations threaten their emotional or spiritual well-being. Each experience, no matter how painful, strengthens the empath's intuition and courage. God's hand is evident in this process, carefully guiding empaths toward situations that honor their gifts while allowing them to release what no longer serves them. Ultimately, learning boundaries the hard way is part of the empath's rise. The breaking of old patterns, the heartbreaks, and the disappointments were all preparation for a stronger, wiser, and more empowered self. God chose empaths because he knew their capacity for love would one day be paired with discernment, strength, and resilience. The heart that once poured endlessly into others without care is now guarded with love, wisdom, and purpose. Strength protects the heart, not to diminish compassion, but to magnify it. Empaths now rise not as victims of their sensitivity, but as masters of their energy, capable of giving without losing themselves, of loving without being depleted, and of living fully without sacrificing their soul. The journey to learning boundaries the hard way is not easy, but it is necessary. It separates the empaths who are ready for divine elevation from those still caught in cycles of giving without return. It teaches the true power of discernment, self-respect, and intentionality. And when the empath steps fully into this empowered version of themselves, the world sees not just sensitivity, but strength, not just compassion, but wisdom, and not just love, but power aligned with purpose. God's plan is unfolding, and those who endured the hardest lessons are the ones rising strongest. The season of being used has ended, and this is a truth that many empaths have been waiting for without even realizing it. For years, empaths have carried the weight of others' needs, emotions, and expectations, often at the expense of their own energy, joy, and peace. They gave without discernment, trusting that their hearts would be appreciated, their efforts would be reciprocated, and their love would be valued. Yet, too often, it wasn't. They were drained, not because they lacked generosity or compassion, but because they extended themselves to people and situations that were not aligned with their growth or their purpose. They gave to those unwilling to receive, poured energy into relationships that were one-sided, and carried burdens that were never theirs to bear. Every act of overgiving chipped away at their vitality, leaving empaths exhausted, frustrated, and questioning whether their sensitivity and care were weaknesses. But in reality, this period of overextension was part of a larger, divine design. God allowed it to happen not to punish empaths, but to prepare them for the moment when clarity, strength, and self-respect would rise within them. For the empath, giving has always been instinctive. Compassion is second nature, and they naturally feel the emotions of others as their own. This gift has been a source of connection and understanding, yet when misdirected, it becomes a doorway for exploitation. God allowed this pattern to continue long enough for empaths to recognize the difference between those who truly deserve their love and those who take it for granted. Each moment of being used, each disappointment, and each betrayal was a lesson in discernment, a quiet nudge toward awakening. Slowly, the empath began to realize that their energy is not infinite, that their heart is sacred, and that self-respect is not negotiable. They learned that boundaries are not a betrayal of their compassion, but a necessity to preserve it. Now, the tide is turning. God is restoring power to the empath, infusing clarity where there was once confusion, and self-respect where there was once self-doubt. The energy that was drained through overgiving is being replenished with intention, and the empath begins to understand that strength does not diminish compassion, it enhances it. In this restored state, empathy is no longer a passive trait, it becomes an active, discerning force. Empaths can now give without fear of depletion, love without being drained, and engage with others without losing their own sense of balance. The restoration is quiet but profound, bringing an inner alignment that transforms every interaction and relationship. This season of restoration also brings awareness. Empaths begin to see clearly who genuinely reciprocates their care and who seeks only to take without giving back. They recognize the subtle dynamics in relationships that were once overlooked, the manipulation, the imbalance, and the subtle emotional draining that went unnoticed for too long. God is equipping them with discernment, a spiritual compass that guides where to invest time, energy, and heart. The empath's power is no longer scattered in every direction. It is focused, intentional, and guarded. Every word, every action, and every emotional investment is now aligned with divine purpose and personal growth. What was once a season of exhaustion and one-sided giving transforms into a season of empowerment. Empaths begin to step into spaces where their gifts are not just accepted, but celebrated. They engage in relationships that are reciprocal, environments that nurture, and opportunities that honor their strength and wisdom. God's restoration is evident in every aspect of their lives, from personal connections to professional endeavors, and even in the way they relate to themselves. Self-respect becomes the foundation for every choice, guiding them towards situations that align with their energy, vision, and spiritual calling. Importantly, this restoration does not make empaths cold or detached. Rather, it elevates their compassion to a new level. They can still feel deeply, care genuinely, and connect authentically, but now with the awareness that their love is powerful and must be given consciously. They no longer bleed for those unwilling to heal, nor do they exhaust themselves in an attempt to fix what is not theirs to fix. Instead, their empathy becomes a tool for discernment, a light that attracts what is aligned and repels what is not. God's timing ensures that this restored power is not wasted. It is directed toward purpose, meaning, and growth that benefits both the empath and the world around them. In the aftermath of this season, the empath experiences a profound transformation. They feel lighter, freer, and more in tune with their own energy. The fatigue and frustration of the past give way to confidence, clarity, and inner strength. Their intuition is sharper, their decisions more precise, and their relationships more balanced. God's restoration confirms that the hardships of the past were not in vain. They were the groundwork for a stronger, wiser, and more empowered self. The empath now understands that being used is no longer part of their story. The chapter has closed, and a new one begins, a chapter defined by intentional giving, protected energy, and a heart that is both compassionate and resilient. The season of being used has ended, and with it comes liberation. Empaths now rise with clarity and strength, understanding that their power lies not just in feeling, but in choosing wisely how, when, and with whom to give their love and energy. God's restoration is complete, bringing empowerment, self-respect, and the peace that comes from knowing they are finally walking in alignment with their true purpose. Pain became spiritual authority for the empath, and this transformation did not happen overnight. Every wound, every heartbreak, and every betrayal was a lesson in disguise, shaping the empath into someone who no longer just understands others theoretically, but who speaks from lived experience. For years, empaths were judged for being sensitive, for feeling too deeply, and for allowing their hearts to guide their choices. They endured emotional pain, disappointment, and rejection in ways that others could not comprehend. People often saw their empathy as weakness, assuming that their kindness and understanding would make them easy to manipulate or take advantage of. Yet, what others failed to see was that each emotional challenge, each season of hardship, was preparing the empath to step into a realm of spiritual authority that cannot be taught or borrowed. It can only be earned through experience. Every difficult relationship, every moment of being misunderstood, and every time the empath was taken for granted added layers of wisdom. The pain of navigating toxic dynamics, of giving love to those who were not ready to receive it, and of witnessing the darker sides of humanity became the foundation of credibility. When an empath speaks now, they do so with a depth that resonates because it is authentic. They do not speak from theory, from books, or from observation alone. They speak because they lived it. The heartbreak, the loss, and the emotional turbulence were not just obstacles. They were lessons that strengthened their understanding of human behavior, spiritual alignment, and emotional intelligence. This authority that emerges from pain is subtle yet undeniable. It commands respect, not through dominance or force, but through the quiet confidence that comes from surviving and thriving despite life's trials. Pain becomes authority when it is transformed into insight. Empaths learn that their experiences, no matter how painful, are not meant to be wasted or hidden. Every scar, every tear, every moment of confusion or suffering contributes to a narrative of resilience and wisdom. God allows this process because He knows that true spiritual authority cannot exist without understanding both the light and the darkness of human experience. The empath's wounds give them perspective, empathy, and credibility in ways that others cannot replicate. People are drawn to them, not just for comfort, but for guidance, clarity, and honest reflection. When they speak, others listen, not because they have titles or accolades, but because they have lived realities that others only glimpse from the outside. The journey to turning pain into spiritual authority is not easy. It requires patience, reflection, and a willingness to confront one's own vulnerabilities. Empaths must first acknowledge their pain, accept it without judgment, and learn from it. This means facing the moments that were humiliating, the betrayals that cut deep, and the disappointments that felt unbearable. Only by fully experiencing and processing these wounds can empaths transform them into tools of insight and influence. The process also involves discernment, knowing when to share lessons, when to offer guidance, and when to protect one's own energy. Spiritual authority is not about constantly giving advice or imposing wisdom. It is about offering clarity when it is needed and holding space when others are ready to receive it. As empaths embrace their pain as authority, they begin to recognize the difference between shallow understanding and profound wisdom. Shallow understanding comes from observation or theory. It is intellectual, sometimes persuasive, but often limited. Profound wisdom, however, is born from lived experience. It carries weight because it has been tested, refined, and proven in the crucible of life's challenges. Empaths who speak from this place resonate deeply because they do not offer platitudes or superficial guidance. They offer truth, grounded in authenticity and tempered by trials. People instinctively sense this authority, often without being able to articulate why. There is a quiet power in someone who has endured suffering and emerged with clarity, perspective, and compassion intact. The transformation of pain into spiritual authority also empowers empaths to set boundaries, recognize manipulation, and protect their energy. They are no longer the ones who blindly give or blindly trust. Their insight into human nature allows them to navigate relationships, workplaces, and social dynamics with wisdom that is both intuitive and learned. God uses their pain as a tool to elevate them into positions of influence and leadership, often in ways that are subtle but deeply impactful. The empath's voice becomes a guide, their experience a map, and their discernment a source of light for others navigating similar struggles. Empaths also realize that their authority is not meant to elevate them above others in arrogance, but to empower, guide, and inspire. They understand the weight of responsibility that comes with credibility. They know what it feels like to be misunderstood, undervalued, and hurt, and this awareness fuels compassion, patience, and authenticity in their interactions. Their advice is rooted in empathy, their guidance in insight, and their presence in calm authority. Pain, once viewed as weakness, becomes the foundation of their spiritual leadership. Finally, the emergence of spiritual authority marks a pivotal moment in the empath's rise. It signals a transition from reactive living, where pain dictated their emotions, choices, and energy, to proactive alignment, where wisdom and insight guide their life with intention. What wounded the empath now elevates them, giving them credibility, voice, and influence. They speak not to prove a point or seek validation, but to illuminate truth, offer guidance, and stand firmly in the authenticity of their lived experience. This authority is magnetic, enduring, and transformative. Pain, once feared and resisted, becomes the most powerful tool in the empath's journey, solidifying their role not just as sensitive souls, but as wise, resilient, and spiritually empowered beings who have earned their voice through trials and emerged stronger, clearer, and unstoppable. God trusts empaths with influence, a responsibility that is both profound and sacred. Unlike conventional power, which often relies on force, manipulation, or loud authority, the influence of an empath is subtle yet undeniable. It is not marked by domination or control, but by the quiet, unwavering presence of someone who has endured, learned, and grown through life's deepest challenges. Empaths have experienced pain, betrayal, and disappointment, and through these trials, God has prepared them to impact the world in ways that are aligned with truth, compassion, and spiritual purpose. Their influence does not need to be shouted or displayed in grandeur, because it carries an inherent weight that comes from authenticity and lived experience. People are drawn to empaths not because they demand attention, but because they exude a presence that commands respect, inspires trust, and sparks transformation. The journey to this kind of influence begins with the empath understanding their own worth. For years, many empaths gave endlessly, often to the point of exhaustion, believing that influence was tied to how much they could give, fix, or sacrifice for others. Yet God's design for their power is different. Influence is not measured by how much one gives blindly, but by how much one gives intentionally, with clarity, boundaries, and wisdom. The empath who understands this begins to step into spaces where their energy is valued, their insight is recognized, and their presence inspires change without force. This is the essence of divine trust. God entrusts those who have endured, observed, and grown with the ability to guide, inspire, and impact others without compromising their heart or essence. Empaths influence without force because their authority comes from alignment with truth. They do not coerce, manipulate, or control outcomes to prove their power. Instead, their influence is magnetic because it resonates with authenticity. When an empath speaks, acts, or leads, people instinctively recognize that their wisdom is not theoretical, it is born from lived experience. Every challenge, heartbreak, and season of testing has contributed to the credibility that others feel intuitively. This type of influence is enduring because it is not dependent on external validation or superficial recognition. It is rooted in presence, discernment, and alignment with divine timing. The rise of an empath is subtle but undeniable. Unlike dramatic transformations that seek attention or applause, the evolution of an empath manifests quietly, yet powerfully. Their influence is felt in the spaces they enter, in the decisions they make, and in the calm authority with which they navigate life. People begin to notice shifts, conversations take on more depth, relationships become more intentional, and energy in their presence feels balanced, steady, and alive. This is not accidental. It is the deliberate unfolding of a soul that has been prepared for leadership, guidance, and impact. God has cultivated within the empath a balance between compassion and discernment, sensitivity and strength, empathy and wisdom, allowing their rise to be both gentle and powerful. Empaths also learn that influence is not about numbers, followers, or recognition. It is about the ripple effect of authenticity and presence. A single word spoken with clarity and truth can heal, awaken, or guide. A simple act of integrity can inspire others to live more intentionally. God trusts empaths to wield this influence carefully, ensuring that every action aligns with higher purpose and does not become diluted by ego or the desire for external validation. Through their journey, empaths realize that true influence does not need to be loud to be felt. It resonates because it is grounded in character, experience, and divine alignment. This type of influence also allows empaths to reshape environments without force. In workplaces, friendships, families, or communities, empaths have the ability to create balance, foster understanding, and inspire change simply through their presence and example. People respond to empaths because they sense integrity, discernment, and emotional intelligence that cannot be faked. The empath's influence is transformational because it impacts not only actions but hearts, minds, and energy. It is a shift in consciousness, subtle but profound, catalyzing growth and awareness in others without the need for pressure, coercion, or control. God's trust in empaths also manifests in the way they navigate challenges. Unlike those who may wield influence to dominate or control, empaths are guided by compassion and wisdom. Their power is measured by their ability to remain centered, act intentionally, and uplift others without losing themselves in the process. The divine trust is evident. Empaths are capable of carrying influence without falling into the traps of ego, manipulation, or overextension. Their leadership is not about proving their value, it is about embodying it. The quiet, grounded authority of the empath is magnetic because it comes from a source that is unwavering, experienced, and divinely aligned. In every interaction, the empath's influence is transformative. They do not need to command attention to create impact. People feel their energy, hear the authenticity in their voice, and recognize the wisdom in their presence. The empath's influence can calm conflict, inspire creativity, nurture growth, and awaken insight in others. God trusts them with this responsibility because empaths understand the weight of their words, the power of their presence, and the sacredness of their energy. Every decision they make, every connection they nurture, and every boundary they maintain is guided by divine wisdom, ensuring that their influence is aligned with purpose, integrity, and spiritual authority. Ultimately, God trusts empaths with influence because their rise is not about force, fame, or recognition. It is about alignment, truth, and the quiet, yet undeniable impact they have on the world around them. Their influence is subtle, grounded, and transformative because it comes from a place of experience, authenticity, and divine preparation. People feel it, respond to it, and are changed by it without even realizing why. The empath's rise is a testament to God's careful design, a demonstration that true power is not loud or aggressive, but present, intentional, and aligned with higher purpose. The narcissistic cycle was a test, and for empaths, it was one of the most challenging and transformative experiences of their lives. Those relationships that drained, manipulated, or betrayed them were not random accidents. They were deliberate lessons, orchestrated by life, or for those who believe, by God, to teach discernment, self-worth, and courage. Empaths are naturally drawn to people who need care, understanding, or healing. Their hearts are open, their intuition is deep, and their empathy allows them to sense pain and suffering in others. This unique ability, however, also makes them vulnerable to individuals who thrive on control, manipulation, and emotional dominance. Narcissists are drawn to empaths because they can sense the depth of their hearts and their willingness to give without question. While the empath sees potential and goodness, the narcissist sees a source of power and attention. This dynamic, repeated over time, becomes a cycle that tests the empath's strength, boundaries, and understanding of themselves. For years, empaths may have questioned why they keep encountering similar toxic relationships, why the same patterns seem to repeat despite their best intentions, or why their hearts repeatedly end up broken. The truth is that these cycles are not punishments. They are divine or universal tests designed to strengthen the empath. Each relationship, no matter how painful, was an opportunity to recognize red flags, to understand the limits of their compassion, and to develop the courage to protect their emotional and spiritual energy. Through repeated exposure to manipulation, gaslighting, and emotional abuse, empaths were forced to confront uncomfortable truths about human behavior, power dynamics, and the importance of boundaries. These experiences were like a crucible, burning away naivety and teaching lessons that no book, lecture, or casual advice could ever convey. One of the most important lessons empaths learn from the narcissistic cycle is discernment. At first, many empaths trust too easily, believing in the potential for growth and change in others. They forgive readily, give chances, and hope for transformation. While this reflects the depth of their heart, it can also make them susceptible to repeated exploitation. Over time, however, life teaches them to see beyond appearances and to read the subtle signs of manipulation, dishonesty, and selfishness. Empaths begin to recognize patterns in words, actions, and energy that signal danger, and they learn to trust their intuition rather than hope for external validation. This discernment is a skill honed through experience, and it becomes a form of spiritual authority. When an empath can recognize a narcissist before being deeply entangled, they are no longer vulnerable to the cycle. They are empowered by knowledge and wisdom. Self-worth is another critical lesson embedded in the narcissistic cycle. Empaths often enter relationships believing that their love, patience, and understanding will earn reciprocity and validation. When these expectations are unmet, it can feel devastating, eroding confidence and self-esteem. Yet, over time, empaths realize that their value is intrinsic, not dependent on the recognition or appreciation of others. They understand that giving love does not diminish their worth, and that self-respect is not optional, it is essential. The cycle teaches empaths that they are deserving of relationships that honor, nurture, and respect them, and that walking away from toxic dynamics is an act of courage, not failure. God, or the universe, uses these relationships to teach that self-worth is the foundation for healthy connections, and that anyone unwilling to respect it does not belong in their lives. Courage is the final piece of the lesson. Ending a relationship with a narcissist is rarely easy. It requires breaking emotional ties, confronting fear, and challenging long-held beliefs about love, loyalty, and responsibility. Empaths are naturally empathetic, often feeling the pain and needs of others as deeply as their own. Walking away from someone who manipulates, belittles, or controls them requires immense courage. This courage, once developed, empowers empaths in all areas of life. They learn that protecting their energy is not selfish, that prioritizing their well-being is necessary, and that love does not require sacrificing one's soul. Courage gained through experience gives empaths the strength to step into their power, rise above toxic patterns, and approach future relationships with clarity, boundaries, and confidence. The narcissistic cycle also teaches empaths the importance of patience and timing. Many empaths rush to fix, to save, or to force resolution within unhealthy dynamics. The repeated patterns, however, reveal that growth and change cannot be imposed, they must be chosen. By observing and experiencing these cycles, empaths learn to wait, to step back, and to act only when their energy is respected and reciprocated. This patience is part of the divine preparation for their rise, allowing them to approach life and relationships from a place of strength rather than neediness. The rise of the empath is quiet but powerful, and this is a truth that is often misunderstood by the world. Unlike dramatic displays of success or revenge, the transformation of the empath does not need to be broadcast or validated by others. There is no need to prove anything, no desire to seek recognition, and no drive to show the world that they have finally arrived. Instead, their rise is measured, deliberate, and rooted in alignment with God's timing. It is a rise that emerges naturally from the combination of wisdom, discernment, and spiritual growth, cultivated through years of pain, challenges, and lessons. Every heartbreak, betrayal, and disappointment that the empath has endured has quietly prepared them for this moment. What the world perceives as quiet is actually a storm of transformation happening within, a recalibration of energy, purpose, and presence that cannot be ignored, even if it is unseen at first glance. One of the most remarkable aspects of this rise is that it is not motivated by revenge or the need to prove others wrong. Empaths often encounter people who have hurt them, doubted them, or taken advantage of their kindness. The natural impulse may be to retaliate, to demonstrate how much stronger they have become, or to show that those who wronged them were mistaken. Yet the quiet power of the empath lies in their ability to rise above these impulses. They do not waste energy on retribution or validation, because their strength is not derived from external approval. It is internal, grounded in alignment with God's purpose and the truth of who they are. This makes their rise unstoppable, as it cannot be shaken or undermined by the opinions, actions, or judgments of others. The empath is no longer reacting to the world. They are responding from a place of power, clarity, and divine guidance. Alignment is the core of this transformation. God elevates empaths when their heart, mind, and spirit are fully aligned with their higher purpose. Every decision, every action, and every boundary set in previous years has contributed to this alignment. The empath has learned where to give, where to protect, and when to step back, creating a life in which energy flows intentionally and meaningfully. Their actions are no longer chaotic or scattered, but precise and purpose-driven. This quiet power is evident in the way they carry themselves, the clarity with which they speak, and the calm authority that radiates from their presence. People feel it instinctively, even if they cannot name it. It is a power that cannot be fabricated or forced, because it is born from truth, experience, and spiritual alignment rather than ego, ambition, or competition. The rise of the empath is also transformative because it changes the way they relate to the world. They no longer seek approval or validation from toxic relationships or environments. Instead, they attract what aligns with their energy, purpose, and growth. The lessons learned through pain, discernment, and spiritual development allow them to recognize who and what belongs in their life, and who or what does not. This selective alignment ensures that their rise is not only powerful, but sustainable. Unlike superficial success, which can be fleeting, the quiet rise of the empath is enduring because it is rooted in integrity, authenticity, and divine timing. God's elevation of the empath often occurs without explanation. To the world, it may seem sudden, mysterious, or even unfair. People may question why the empath, who has endured so much, now experiences clarity, influence, or abundance. Yet those who understand the journey know that this rise is the natural outcome of years of preparation, refinement, and spiritual growth. There is no need for dramatics or justification, because true power does not require validation. The empath's life becomes a living testament to resilience, wisdom, and divine alignment. Their presence alone inspires respect, their choices influence others, and their energy shifts the environments they enter. This quiet rise is a demonstration of what happens when patience, endurance, and alignment converge with God's timing. An essential part of this process is the internal transformation that accompanies external shifts. The empath no longer measures success by societal standards, material gain, or the opinions of others. They measure it by alignment, integrity, and the ability to live in harmony with their own truth. This inner authority is powerful because it cannot be shaken by external chaos or manipulation. The empath has learned to trust themselves, to follow their intuition, and to move confidently in directions that serve their growth and purpose. God's quiet elevation ensures that the empath is equipped not only to succeed, but to inspire, guide, and lead in ways that are authentic, grounded, and transformative. The rise of the empath is also marked by subtle influence. People around them begin to notice shifts, not because the empath seeks attention, but because their energy has changed. Relationships evolve, opportunities emerge, and life begins to reflect the alignment the empath has cultivated. Others are drawn to their authenticity, clarity, and presence. The empath's rise creates ripples of change that extend beyond their immediate life, impacting communities, workplaces, and relationships. This influence is quiet yet profound, demonstrating that power does not always need to be loud to be effective. It is a natural consequence of living in alignment with truth, purpose, and divine timing. Ultimately, the quiet yet powerful rise of the empath is a culmination of every lesson learned, every boundary established, and every challenge overcome. It is the result of God's careful preparation, ensuring that the empath steps into a life where their energy, compassion, and wisdom are honored and amplified. There is no need for revenge, no need for proving anything to anyone. What matters is alignment with self, with purpose, and with God's divine plan. When this alignment occurs, the empath's rise is unstoppable, undeniable, and transformative. It is a rise that commands respect, inspires change, and embodies the quiet strength of a heart that has been refined, tested, and elevated.